Many consumers believe that paying off collections is the best way to improve their credit. In reality, paying off a collection will almost always hurt your credit scores. Today, we're going to focus on exactly what happens to your credit when a collection account is paid off. And at the end of this webinar, you'll know the facts, the insider secrets that the collection companies and the debt agencies, they really just don't want you to know. Reason number one, paying off a collection will update your SOL. Now, every account has what we call a statute of limitation. The statute of limitation determines how long a creditor can collect on that debt. Now, the statute of limitation is going to vary from state to state. I think here in Georgia, for a consumer or credit debt, that statute of limitation is 4 years. But places like California and Arizona, New York, I believe that statute could be up to 6 years. And in some states, I believe the statute is as low as 2 years. So each state has a different time frame that a collector can attempt by law to collect on that debt. Now, your statute of limitation will also be based on the account type, whether it's a mortgage, a judgment, tax lien. There are a few accounts that have a longer period of time for a statute of limitation. Credit cards and other installment loans, like car loans, usually have a shorter time frame that a collector can collect on that debt. Now, like I said earlier, many states have a statute of limitations of 4 years on credit card and contract debt. That means the collector can only collect for 4 years beyond the date of last activity of that account. Mortgages in many states have a statute of limitation of up to 7 years where the bank can pursue a particular debt. Now, when a payment is made on a collection account, the date of last activity is updated to the date that the payment was made. All right, this is very important information, and I'm going to go into detail into the next slide, but pay attention to this statement very carefully and keep this in your brain. When a payment is made on a collection account, the date of last activity is updated to the date the payment was made. So let's look at a real life example. So let's say you had a Chase credit card that went into collections 3 years ago. Now, the statute of limitation was 4 years. That would mean that you could only be pursued for 1 more year on that account. But when you make a payment, you update the date of last activity on that account, therefore extending the statute of limitations for an additional 7 years. If you make a partial or a full payment to that collection account, you reset the statute of limitations to the day when you make the payment. That will have only been able to pursue for 1 more year if you didn't make that payment. But now, because you made that payment, you just gave the collector the legal authority to collect on that debt for an additional 4 more years. Now, when you pay off the collection, you extend the statute of limitations on how long that collector can collect. This is one great reason why you don't want to pay off a collection. So just keep in mind, side note, keep in mind that debt collectors are paid to collect money. Okay, they're not paid to inform you of your rights as far as the Fair Debt Creditor Reporting Act. It's up to you to know those rights, and being ignorant of those rights can severely damage your credit and cost you money. So always remember that paying off a collection, whether it be a partial or full payment, will almost always extend the statute of limitation that they're able to collect on their debt. So that's reason number one why we don't want to pay off a collection. Excuse me. Reason number two, paying off a collection does not change the account status. Another big one, and we're going to go into detail. Paying off a collection does not change the account status. If you have an account in good standing, it reports on your credit report as a status 1. Okay, this is a part of the credit report that the average consumer doesn't even know exists. But there's whether it's on your TransUnion, Experian, or Equifax credit report, there's a code, a digit code that determines the status of that account. One status means it's in good standing. So for example, a paid agreed as mortgage reports as a M1 status. A paid as agreed revolving account reports as an R1 status. When a late payment occurs, that status changes, and based on how late the account is being paid. The first late payment changes to a 2, and as the account becomes further behind, the number increases until the account ends up in a collection as a 9 status. All collections report as a 9 status and severely damage your credit score. Let me say that again. All collections report as a 9 status and severely damage your credit score. Key words being all collections. So, your credit scores are a mathematical model or algorithm used to depict the risk of you going 90 days late on an account in the future. So when you have a collection in a 9 status, your risk is high and your scores will be lower as a result. But when you pay off a collection, the account still remains a 9 status. It still looked at a defaulted account. Even though you paid it, you're still just as high of a risk in the eyes of the lender. Remember what we said, all collections report as a 9 status. That's paid or unpaid. Partially paid, unpaid, or paid is still a status 9 on your credit report, and it's still a collection. So the truth is, your scores will not go up when a collection is paid, because the collection 9 status still remains and is still looked upon as a defaulted account. Paying off a collection will not raise your score for this reason. And this is what I explain to my clients when they come to me and say, hey Brian, hey Mr. Howard, my credit's bad, I'm really trying to get things in order. I got some really old bills from a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago that I need to pay off because I really want to improve my credit. Well, the reality is paying off a collection will not raise your scores for this reason. Please bear with me a moment. I'm just going to take a sip of water here. My voice is getting a little groggy. Just bear with me just a second. I apologize for that, everyone, but as I said, my voice was getting a little ratchet here. This weather here in Georgia is bothering me this morning. Okay, so let's go into the third reason, the third and final reason. Paying off, and this kind of piggybacks off of what we talked about earlier with statute of limitation. Paying off a collection will update your date reporting. Every account on your credit report has a particular time it can be reported for. The time these accounts can report vary based on the type of accounts. Most negative accounts remain on your report for 7 years. Tax liens, bankruptcies, other government accounts can remain for up to 2 years. Other IRS debts can remain on your report indefinitely, never be removed in some cases. Now, the time starts from the date you went late, not the date of your last payment like the statute of limitation. Many creditors will update this date when a collection is paid off, even though they're not supposed to by law. Pay attention. Many creditors will update this date when a collection is paid off, even though they're not supposed to by law. But if you're in a repayment plan for a debt and you miss a payment, they can legally update this date on your report. So if you're in a repayment plan for a debt and you miss a payment, now they have the legal right to update the date on your credit reports. Okay, let's give you a real life example. You have a Capital One credit card. Everybody's familiar with Capital One, right? So you have a Capital One credit card which you started going late on 4 years ago. The account is due to drop off in 7 years. So since it's 4 years old already, it would drop off in 3 or more years, theoretically, right? By law, right? Only 7 years to report, right? But in many cases, when you make a payment on this, the debt collector updates this date to the date that you made the payment. That means the account will now report on your credit much longer than it should. It was due to drop off in 3 years based on the prior example, but now the clock is reset and will remain for another 7 years. That's very powerful information, ladies and gentlemen. That's very powerful information, and you really need to understand this. The account was due to drop off in 3 years because it was already 4 years old. Okay, but because you defaulted on a prepayment plan, not on a repayment plan, rather I should say, now you've just given the creditor or the debt collector an additional 7 years to collect on that debt. Paying off of collections in many cases updates your account so collectors can keep the negative item on your report much longer than it should be, and that's their goal, because they want to keep it on there longer and keep the dates fresh so they can continue to try to collect on that money. Now, When you pay off a collection, many items on your reports are updated. As you know, most of them are not good and they will severely hurt your credit score. The only good thing that happens if a balance is reported as zero is if it's paid off. Your score benefits very little by having a zero balance instead of an outstanding balance. So in other words, it's a collection, but now it's a collection, it's been now being reported as a zero balance. It really doesn't help you score. It shows as a zero balance, but in the mathematical algorithm that's used to collect your credit score, it doesn't really help your credit score. We're talking 3 points or less in the difference in your credit score. But having a zero balance does not outweigh having the data last activity updated. So your credit scores mostly will go down as the bureau see it as a recent collection and a status 9 collection. This means your risk is still very high and your credit scores are gonna stay low. The only way to improve credit is to delete the negative item. When the item is deleted, all the history is wiped out and the 9 status collection is gone for good. If you don't want to pay off a collection, make sure you obtain if you do want to pay off the collection, make sure you obtain what we call a pay to delete letter to have them remove the collection completely. Otherwise, dispute and delete your negative items. But by no means do you pay off the collections or it will hurt your score due to the 3 reasons that we've mentioned in this webinar.